All right. Well, thank you for being here. How do you
Thanks for
feel so
having me.
far?
Feel great. Feel like I'm around a bunch of professionals, so I feel good. Nervous.
Good. Why are you nervous?
Because there's a lot of cameras on me right now and lighting, and I don't look great in harsh lighting.
No, you look great. I promise you. You want to give everyone a little introduction of who you are and your background?
Yeah, my name is Laila. I formerly went to the University of Florida. I stayed in Gainesville because I'm a creative entrepreneur and I have two businesses here. One of them is called How Bazaar. It's a brand clothing store venue in downtown Gainesville. And then another one is called Dion Dia, which is an independent record label.
How would you describe Layla prior to coming to Gainesville or going to UF?
Mm, Prior to coming to Gainesville, well, I came to Gainesville for the University of Florida. I was living in a pretty small town in Florida called Ocala, and I was pretty isolated, not really too connected to my community, just kind of searching for that and really wanting to be connected, but not having a means to be. So I just kind of focused on work and activism at a young age. So I was really on a social work path throughout the majority of my upbringing and my childhood and all throughout high school. And then when I came to UF, I continued to explore that and other parts of my creativity.
You say you're part of like activism. Like, what were you doing activism for?
So I'm originally Palestinian and Lebanese, but I was really focused on activism for Palestinian people. But that stretched across to all occupied and oppressed people because we know that we live under the same struggle and can't focus on one occupied people without focusing on another. So really, it was broad work that I was doing in activism, but my main focus was Palestine.
Prior to coming to UF, what was like your first like thought of like college? Like, what was like your mindset regarding that, and then how did it feel when you first like got here?
Well, I didn't necessarily want to go to UF. I actually made the decision and submitted literally the last hour possible before the deadline of going to UF. So it was kind of weird. Like, again, I didn't really plan for it. I didn't necessarily get all of my things in order, like housing here. I didn't get meal plan. I didn't really figure out what I wanted to do in terms of a major. I looked into things just in case I had to come here, but it wasn't my main focus. I really wanted to go out of state, but there were a lot of things that ended up holding me in Florida. For example, my grandparents, who I was a caretaker for, so I wanted to stay in the area, and then also the work that I was doing in the prisons and other areas that I was volunteering. So I wasn't really necessarily ready to give up on that work, and that's what kept me in Gainesville or kept me in Florida.
What would you say was your first impressions like when you enrolled into UF?
So I had an interesting experience since I didn't want to go to UF. Like I said, I didn't live on campus, so I had to find an apartment off campus. And I ended up living like down 34th and Archer and really quickly started to figure out that Gainesville was more than just a university, which I feel like is an experience that a lot of people have later in their UF careers. So I was grateful for that to be able to just start exploring at a really young age, just kind of figuring out what the scene was. I started to get to express myself more artistically, more creatively than in a way that I didn't get to do when I was living in Ocala. So yeah, really quickly, I just started to get acclimated to Gainesville as a city rather than just campus, which I feel like enriched my experience here a lot more and really put me on the path that I ended up going on in Gainesville, which was exploring entrepreneurship and creativity.
As you started embarking on entrepreneurship, like, did you feel like any part of your background, either being Lebanese or Palestinian or being a woman, how did that impact your overall like experience while being here at UF as well?
I mean, I think those parts of my identity affect everything that I do in any area that I'm at. Being Palestinian, especially in the States, is pretty bittersweet. There's a lot of toughness in it because, you're thinking about your family, your friends, your community over there that may be suffering, that may be living through hardship and struggle while you're over here, like getting an education and, like living a completely different life. So in a lot of ways, there's guilt in it. And then there's the toughness of having to explain yourself over and over again, explain the situation, especially when it's not as well known in the States what's going on over there. You kind of become a spokesperson for what's happening, even if you don't necessarily want to be or feel qualified to be. So, I mean, in that way, things can be pretty difficult being Palestinian, but it's also a really beautiful thing. And that's why I say that it's bittersweet, because our culture is just so vibrant and so beautiful, so celebratory, so exciting. And I really, even though I'm not there right now in Palestine, all of those things get passed on through my family, through our customs and things like that. So I'm able to spread those things in the work that I do now in Gainesville. And so that's the beauty of it. But having those identities is just a lot of, I don't know, it affects you wherever you are, It doesn't matter if it was UF or if it was somewhere else. It's something that like we have to deal with on a regular basis, being Palestinian, being a woman, all those things.
When you decided to start like having two businesses, what motivated you to begin even with starting with the first one?
Well, I was still in college when we started our first business. So it's me and two friends who are brothers named Jahi and Kari. We had met in school at UF. Jahi and I were in the same astronomy class. And so we just really quickly realized that we had similar backgrounds where we were very focused on social work and community work and activism. So Jahi and Kari had a really interesting experience growing up where their parents had a nonprofit called the Access Center in Archer, Florida. And so for them, their whole goal was offering internet access and computer programming for self-development to rural Black communities across Florida. So they had access centers in Archer and Cross City and Williston, Bronson, all of these areas. And it being a family business, Jahi and Kari just had to, do everything for their parents and for the nonprofit. So they learned design and they learned photography and videography, and they really just became children of the computer, of the internet. And then for me, my background, like I was saying, was in social work from a very young age and activism from a very young age, where I was already like volunteering in programs and things like that when I was in elementary school and starting activism seriously while I was in middle school and all throughout high school. And so again, when we met, we realized we had those similar backgrounds in social work and community work, but we also had a lot more creativity within us that we wanted to explore. So we decided to start a record label together, Dion Dia, because, sorry, a label can kind of become an entity, or it is an entity. It's just like a brand, a living entity that can constantly change and be a cross intersection of all of these different types of culture, whether it be fashion, obviously music, art, food, skate, automotive, all of these different things. And that's where our passions really spread to, was just a lot of different forms of street culture. So we started the label as a way to affect social change in a more creative and artistic way, and a cultural way, while combining all of these different forms of street culture. So that's really what motivated us to get it started. And we started doing programs like recording programs in the hospital with terminally ill adolescents, and in the prison with people who are incarcerated with life sentences. So we were recording records, recording music, publishing it for them as a way to preserve their legacy and push out messages from a community that's very purposefully disconnected from the rest of us.
While trying to build this business along with still being a student, how would you say like it impacted your overall mental health, and just how did you feel about being able to juggle all of that together?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that I'm realizing and reflecting on later in life, that I definitely didn't give myself the college experience that I could have. I didn't necessarily have a lot of free time in college to explore, like different clubs and different resources at the university. Even like just recently, I got contracted to bring silent disco headphones to the Florida Museum. And they were telling me how students get into the Butterfly Museum for free and all these things. And I was like, man, I never used any of those things that were offered as a student. And I definitely didn't give myself a lot of grace and a lot of patience. I was definitely really hard on myself, just constantly working and trying to create what we envisioned. And I'm grateful that I had the space to do that and did it in my college years, because it would be extremely hard if I started now. It probably would be impossible. And I would be on a completely different path, probably in like more education right now, like in law school, things like that. But having that experience in college it was good because it was the right time for me to do it. And I was definitely like had the energy to do so and the space to do so. But it's sad to think sometimes about how I did miss out on certain social interactions and connections that I could have made and different opportunities that were offered to you when you're only a student.
What keeps you motivated when you think about that?
I think what keeps me motivated is just thinking about, honestly, it's stopping sometimes, like just stopping for a second and really taking a minute to think, which honestly at this point I don't get to do enough because it's just constant running around and like making different things happen. So I think just like taking a moment to really reflect on where we were to where we are now, and thinking about the people that have become so important to me, which are people who are now in this community that's been built around Dia and How Bizarre and like all of these different projects that we've been working on. And just seeing that like people are they're really getting exactly what we envisioned out of both of those projects. And it's exactly what we wanted, like Fakhoury and I, as like young people growing up in the small cities, towns that we were in, like that's exactly what we craved, like what we searched for when we were younger. So now just seeing other people get to experience that and like, find that community that they wanted as well is definitely what motivates me and makes me feel better when I reflect back on just wishing that I had experienced college a little bit more.
For someone that, being that now that you're done with college and there are going to be people who are going to be coming in after you, the new wave of kids, what is something that you would want to impart, like some type of knowledge or something to say to them that may be different from what like universities typically tell college students?
I think the main thing that I'd want to encourage anyone to do is to try as much as possible. Try all kinds of things, get to experience a lot of things, put yourself in circles that maybe you wouldn't have found yourself in before, you wouldn't have expected to. That's what I think was the best takeaway that I gotten from UF, is just getting to meet so many different types of people, to where I learned so much about the world, about others, about myself. And I think that's one of the best things that you can do when you're offered an experience like that, which is UF, like so many international students, so many different programs, so many different clubs, all different kinds of things that you can try and put yourself into uncomfortable situations sometimes, but ultimately situations that can help you grow as a person.
Finally, like, what does the future look like for you?
Oh my gosh, what a question. I don't necessarily have a profound answer for what the future holds for me, but I know that everything I do is centered around activism, and it'll always come back to that. And even right now, if it is presenting as more so just like celebratory things, events, and just like spending time enjoying things and like enjoying creativity, that's all part of it for sure. And celebration is definitely part of the revolution. It's part of mine. It's part of like history's revolutions. But all of this it means something, you know, like every little thing that we do with both brands, with Dion Dia, with How Bazaar, it's meant to build up to something more important, that really affects like communities and social change. Like our goal is really to create paradigm shifts and culture shifts that have long lasting change worldwide, rather than just something that's, you know, like fun and happening in Gainesville. So in terms of what the future holds, it's just kind of keep pushing until we reach that vision and continue to keep using creativity for social good and social change.
Amazing. Thank you for being here, Laila. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. I know you're a very busy person, so
Thanks for having me.
yeah, you are definitely an inspiration to a lot of people. So I'm glad that you were
Thank
able to share your
you.
story today.
Thank you. I'm honored. Sorry if I didn't tell it well.
No, you sure did.
Thank you.